your host for the show, Michael Patrick King.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I am thrilled at the turnout. I am a little shocked to see so many men in the room. And I know that the Aspen Grid program can be a little confusing, so I want to make sure you know where you are. This is a live show about Sex, the series, not a series of live sex shows. Anyone confused? Anyone need a Bass Ale? There will be no hot girl-on-girl action tonight. Unless we start to bomb, and then I'm pretty sure I can get some of the writers to go down to a thong. And if they don't, I will, because quite frankly, why am I wearing a pink thong if not to show it off later? Okay, I have a confession to make. For the last couple of years, I have been in an intense relationship of a sexual nature with 6 different women at the same time. Now, what makes me different than all other men is that these women know about it. In fact, they participate in it every day. They're in a relationship with each other, they're in a relationship with me, all day long, we talk about sex and love. In fact, if you come to think of it, we're kind of like one of those polygamous Utah marriages without the scary redhead, freckle-faced kids. So to be clear, we are here this evening to have some fun talking about writing Sex and the City, the series, with Jenny, Cindy, Amy, Julie, Elisa, and Liz, the women behind Carrie, Samantha, Charlotte, and Miranda. Now, thank you. I just want to say something up front that's kind of my personal belief about the idea that only women should write women's shows, or that women shouldn't write men and men shouldn't write women. I really don't believe that there should be like a rule like all women should write a woman's show, or all men should write that, or all doctors should write ER. I really think that it's really about the individual writers. And I want to point out that the women that I hired are writers, and they got the jobs because I believe they all have big hearts, really funny, they have the smarts, and they're willing to talk about it, and they know how to write about it. It also didn't hurt that they were single in a committed live-in relationship, but with issues about marriage. CD Aiden Arc if you need more information. The good news about working in a writing room for years with all women, about being the only man in the writing room, is you're the only man in a writing room with women. The bad news is you're the only man in a writing room with women. And it gets very, very deep, intense, and talky. And it's great for the show, but I want to share with you 2 things that happened to me. In season 5, in the middle of all figuring out what their lives were about, I got a rash. So I went to the doctor, and I said, "What is this rash?" And he did some tests, and he came back and he said, "You have a yeast infection." Great, now I'm a woman. And, you know, I've done a lot of on-the-record talk about why I decided that I didn't want to do another season because of the quality of the scripts. But the real reason is I was afraid I'd wake up with a vagina. Yes, I said vagina. And then the final story I want to tell you is at the end of season 6, we had a very precarious morning. What happens is we get together in the morning and we talk about the date that did happen, that didn't happen, the heart that got broken, that didn't get broken, the house that got bought, that didn't get bought, the career that is working, that isn't working. And one day, one of the writers came in very upset because her ex-boyfriend had published a memoir where he did a character based on her and had used the dreaded the phrase, baby fat. Exactly. 2 days later, we were still talking about baby fat. And there were tears, and there was sessions about it, and there was proof, and there was lean lunches, and there were a lot of things going on. And finally, about 2 o'clock, day 2, I said, Come on! You all look great. You weigh exactly what you want. Let's get to work. And Elisa turned to the other writers and said, great, we've done it. We've turned Michael straight. Ladies and gentlemen, a writer's best friend, Sarah Jessica Parker. There you go. Uh-oh, Mike's all over you. Mike's all over her. Too bad, Mike, huh? She took care of it herself. Just to make sure that everything's on the up and up and people know this isn't a fixed panel.
All right.
We've never met.
We've not ever met.
That's correct.
Absolutely true.
And we both
Well,
don't.
we just met backstage.
That's
before,
correct. That is true.
But other than that, no.
And
we've not
we
met
do
before.
not work for HBO. We've never worked for them.
No,
Okay,
I
good.
would
So
never
you know
work
it's
for HBO.
fully unbiased. So Sarah Francesca Parker. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What makes writing bad? And
Oh,
please
God.
don't feel the need to point fingers or name, or even talk about anyone in our show. Unless you want to trash other shows, go ahead.
No.
Really, what does make writing bad, do you think?
Oh, gosh. Well, I don't know that there's one. Well, there's obviously not one right answer. I think it's because I think people respond to sometimes, in my opinion, bad writing, and they think it's very good. So this is from my point
For
of
you,
view.
yeah, always from your point of view.
I think when people aren't made complicated, when things are easy, when they lack, well, it's hard to explain because I think I always look for things to be real and nuanced and tiny and then big. And so when I just see, and it's inappropriate, just kind of grand sort of stabs at complication, to me, I feel like it's lazy or not good or simply not up to the task.
And just really disappointing.
It's disappointing because, as everybody, the cliche, well, if it's not on the page, then, and I think that's, for the most part, really true. I think you can try to be the very best you can be, but you need words to help you travel. You need good words. And when you force better intention, when you force an intention on something that doesn't have the substance, it can't hold it. It's like a boat made of wood particle board rather than something real.
The thing about if it's not on the page...
That's the craziest, longest,
it's the
lack of oxygen-induced answer.
Exactly.
But if you can get something from that, you're
I
a better
think
man
that,
than I.
you said if it's on the page, I think one of the great things about doing a series for so long is that after a while, it can be half on the page and half in you.
Yes.
I mean, it can be hinted at rather than, now you have to convince
Yes.
everybody, including the actors.
But I think that, and that's what I really didn't know about working in television, and what's one of the many wonderful surprises is how nuanced and how little television can be because
Right.
of this great luxury of time. You have 6 years to tell
Right.
a life, and then it becomes real, and very soon into the second season you can already start
Referencing.
doing half.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting for an actor to get to fill in the intended
Right.
spaces that good writing
And it's good
can
for us
leave.
because all we have to do is touch it, and the audience has done the work.
Yes.
So it's fun. Do you know it's bad right away? Or do you keep hoping every page? Can you smell it? Is it
Actually, I
stinky?
have a smell on it. Well, I like to be. I'm not talking about the show now because I have no recollections of any bad odor. So just in general, I think I tend to be a rather hopeful person when I read a script, and I keep mining. I want to find that it's good, but there is real disappointment when something's not good for me, because it's like it's like a book. You want the book to fill you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we had a great thing because we all knew each other. So when you're on a other project, how much power do you need to get change in the writing?
Well, I don't know. I think it's going to be curious to find out. You know, in the past on hiatuses, when I've done films or worked in the theater, I wasn't so entrenched in the way we work. And I think it'll be, you know, an interesting and curious experience to see what it feels like if I'm not being part of the producing team, what it feels like to, if you say yes to something, to help, if it has any, if it's necessary to fix things, how you very gracefully you finesse something along.
Well, she's been very graceful with us because when something wasn't right, she'd say, I think we should look at this area again. And I would say, okay. And
very rare. And honestly, but very rarely we ever have to.
Very rarely. But there's a section, and she always says, this could be better. And I'd say, what exactly? Because it's once we were in Carrie for a while, I figured she knew exactly what she was talking about. So she'd say, well, let me talk a little bit. And I said, well, just do it. She said, I'm not a writer. And then she'd go ahead and do this riff. And I'd write it exactly. And then it would go in. The phone call to Big in Paris, the drunk phone call. She wrote verbatim.
Well, but, you know, you start thinking on the rare occasion when you and I have worked on things, you start, there's a house in which you work now. And so, based on what I've learned, all that has informed anything that I would say to you in a room if I have the balls to say to you, can I work on a scene with you? So it's with, you know, out of only, you know, great respect that I would even engage in.
Yes. Okay, how was Square Pegs different from Sex and the City?
Well, some people think that Patty Green grew up to be Carrie Bradshaw. And you know what? I don't think that's such a leap. Does anybody remember?
Especially when they're playing on Nickelodeon in the future.
Well, oh, my God. Well, I don't know if anyone ever saw Square Pegs, but actually, oh, that's nice to know. But, you know,
do something from Square Pegs right now. Put some glasses in a locker.
She was very, very bright, and she was, you know, one of those girls in high school who, you know, her mother would tell her, just try to get yourself to college, and then you'll find somebody you can talk to outside of your best friend, Lauren Hutchinson. And I actually don't, you know, there are some, you know, obvious aesthetic differences, but who's to say, really, what Carrie Bradshaw was in high school? But how was I different on that show, or how was it different?
No, just writing. Anne was a very, very grown-up writer.
And she was amazing. You know, she was just coming off of Saturday Night Live, and she was...
Ann Bates, right?
Ann Bates. And is it Beats? No, it's Ann Bates. And she was amazing, and she had also on staff with her, she had Rosie Schuster, and she had Janice Hirsch, and she had Margie. Oh, my gosh.
Grossman, right?
Yeah, Margie Grossman, who's maybe some of you know.
She's dead.
Who was a wonderful, wonderful writer, and a kind of pedigree of coolness, you know, I thought anyway. And it was wonderful. I had literally nothing to do in a room in any official capacity. I was a classic hired hand, but I loved them. I knew enough to know that they were smart and funny and crazy.
I have another question. Voiceovers. Friend or foe?
Oh, you know, that's such a complicated question.
We've been, you know, I mean, whenever people do parodies of our shows, those bastards, what they do is they always go, meanwhile uptown, meanwhile downtown, meanwhile inside, meanwhile outside.
That's fair. Just kidding.
It's true. I mean, and in the first year, the voiceovers were ridiculous.
Oh, they were endless. And I think that the thing that's hard about it is that I don't even like to brush my teeth alone. Like, I like to always... I'm one of 8 children. I always like to be with everybody, you know. And voiceovers, they force me all alone into a room. And, you know, it's tedious. Those of you know, there's something rather tedious. It's repetitive. You know, I have to do it at least 3 times so that I give Michael Patrick and his editors, you know, choices. And, of course, I want that for myself, too. But it's tedious. It's little tiny work, and so it's the hardest part of the job for me, and I'm alone, and I don't like to be alone with my thoughts. How horrifying. And so it's the hardest part of the job for me, but I'm really glad that it's there because I think it does an enormous. You and I talked about it recently. It does an enormous amount of work for us. It allows us to add pages and pages of story for all the characters without the production costs and without the time. I mean, it's really, it was a clever concept.
Well, for a writer,
actually.
it's your best friend. You can just get right into the moment you need. And our big thing in the writing room, I don't know if anybody picked up on this, but our big subversive end of the series thing was that there were no voiceovers in the last episode, except for at the very end, at the very top. And the whole conceit that we had was she left her computer, she left her column, and we were really kind of in the writing room frightened, you know.
Scary.
And as a result,
those scripts
people,
and they were perfect.
And people kept saying, "Oh, I felt so much," and I couldn't help but wondering if it was because we stopped telling them what to think. You know,
they were allowed to feel the experience, and also the isolation of that particular experience.
Yeah, we think, that in the writing room that Carrie's the hardest. She's the hardest character.
I'm very
flattered. She's hard because she's two people. She's the person and the writer, and so all the column stuff has to go to a higher level. So we're always terrified about getting Carrie. Why do you think she's the hardest?
Well, I think because,
They're all
would
wonderful
guess.
and they're all challenging, but she's kind of the hard. If you can get Carrie, you can get the show.
With the other three women, they are intentionally archetypes, and I think that, and what everybody, your stellar writing staff and yourself have worked so hard to do is make sure you keep them archetypes, but you make them more and more deep and complicated, and really flesh them out, and still they are identifiable to the audience.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not easier, but there is an understanding. I think Carrie is, the everyman, and so she can, which also allows for a lot of freedom in clothing and hair and dress and makeup. And I think it just, it's like your mother setting you free. It's daunting, how to make choices, I think. And I'm glad that I was always glad for that.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I was going to say, so it must not have been important. Anyway, that's
you were
why
glad
maybe.
for what? The idea that it was a big
she
challenge?
Was hard, because I think, I don't know, I just like the idea of all of us having to work that much harder.
Yeah, we had to work harder.
Just because I always, we always wanted it to.
The problem was she was so smart. I mean, she was. I learned in very early in the show. We were doing the show about. It's called Bay Married Pigs, where she goes out and this guy comes up to her and she knows instantly he's the marrying kind. Oh. And I wrote a whole version of that script where she didn't know, and she couldn't figure out what his problem was. And all of a sudden, Candace Bushell, who was around at that time and wrote the book, and it makes these gigantically great sweeping statements. I said to her, "Would Carrie know that this guy was a marrying?" I said, "Oh, honey, every woman in New York knows everything about every man's penis." And I thought, if you can make a statement like that, then Carrie knows that this guy's the marrying guy. And so when we realized that the only person Carrie doesn't know about is herself, it got harder. Good, thank you. I'm telling you, I'm scared when I give you a script. There's a person
that sounds bad.
No, not because of you, the person, but because of I pitch the entire season to Sarah Jessica every year, like she's, a movie preview in Glendale for a reaction.
And I always am like this.
Yeah, she's always great. And then I walk away, and we all go away, and we write them, and then we hand them to her. But I personally think you write, you write to impress. I mean, that's terribly revealing. But, I mean, you write to impress the entire world in general, but you put someone there that you're going to hand it to. And for me, that was you, because you're Carrie and I'm writing the main character. Do you act for someone?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, I mean...
Do you have one person that you're targeting, like, I hope this person likes this work?
Well, not to toss it back at you, but I want very much... I mean, I think it's a flaw. It's a fatal flaw to want to have that be something that's really actually important to you, to want to make people happy or proud. I'm serious.
It's a codependent
because I
acting
think
school.
there are people who have the ability to not need that, but I always worried what you thought of I always want you to be happy with whatever. I said to you after I read the last two scripts, I said, these scripts, I just thought they were perfect. They were perfect, and the only thing that scared me was then I had to do them, right?
Yeah.
I told you that on the phone. that terrified
She
me.
actually told me on my voicemail, if you'd like to hear it, I saved it. Do you know how many times I've had to save it? 9. So it doesn't get deleted. It'll be a bad day for me when I delete it.
But you do. But also, I think the crew becomes very complicit. For me, they were on the. I was very reliant on the camera department, not just for obvious reasons. I mean, but.
Meaning.
Hey, that was a good joke, almost.
Yeah.
Almost. But
We'll punch it up.
But that's what you're here for. But I just really, I just wanted them to be proud of the work that they were part of. I know, I actually mean that, but
Hardest scene.
describe it.
Do you have one that you thought, oh, this is I don't know. This is the hardest scene I've ever had to do for you guys.
Oh, geez, I don't know. There
You know-
were many. You want to remind me of
I'll
one?
remind you of one that I thought was hard was the goodbye at Aiden wedding. And it really hard because it's a one-camera film show, which means you shoot all one actor one way, and then sometimes it takes an enormous amount of time
Yeah,
to
that
turn
was
around and
hard.
get the other. And so on John Corbett's side, it was perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect.
And then we
And
had
then
an
it came
hour
around.
turnaround, and it
It
came
was
back
awful,
to you.
and I have no technique at all. I really don't. I have like none. And but I thought at that day, I thought, God, technique might serve me well today, but it was too late. And I remember the director, who was very well intentioned. He's actually a friend of mine. He came up to me, and I don't know if he could see the worry on my face as the hours were ticking by, and he said, Can I tell you a story? And he tried to tell me a helpful story that was very sad about his life.
Like a little
which,
kid getting-
only confuses me.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
yeah.
then I'm thinking about him. And it was really distracting. I always tell Michael, I can't barely take notes. I can't think about anything when I'm working. I have anyway, so...
So on John's side, it was like,
No,
Niagara
it was like
Falls,
bing, bing, bing,
and on
you
your
know,
side,
yeah.
dust.
It was just like tumbleweed.
Wood shooting out of your eyes. And I was just
I don't know
watching
if
you.
somebody, what happened. We finally managed it.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
it was
finally
that sad
sat into it.
story.
I don't think so.
But I think that there are scenes that you worry about because you think they're going to be hard, and in fact, those scenes, aren't. Some of the hardest scenes for me have been coffee shop scenes, and I don't know why. I think because there's there's so much an anchor of the show, and there's so much that's necessary, and
And jokes.
That's a
Jokes.
tough room,
Yeah.
actually. It's a really tough room to
Coffee
work
shop,
in.
you're there like 10 hours,
Yeah,
and you're
it's-
just
yeah,
doing the
it's
same jokes over and over again.
Yeah.
We say, remember it was funny? Remember when it was funny?
Michael will be on the set, take the can lines,
And then the
killing lines.
bad food. They all started out eating cheeseburgers and pasta, and then by
But by the end, Cynthia and I were still the only ones eating. We were still like, free food? It's going to end soon. Put in your purse.
They can't see anything under the table. Do you have a most fun scene?
Oh, my God. I've had so many fun scenes.
Scene you regretted? Saying yes to?
No, because even the one I thought I regretted saying yes to, when I saw it, they showed where were we? They showed, in the farewell, they showed me saying that, I really didn't want to. I begged you.
Not to the fart.
No, that I understood. No, when Carrie got a diaphragm spine.
Carrie got a diaphragm
Whatever.
stuck, yeah.
But when I saw it, I was like, well, that's not...
but that's what you said. That's not true.
No, I trusted it happened
Please,
to
I've
somebody.
gotten my diaphragm stuck many times, and you have no idea how hard that is. Let's talk about the fake endings. Pat asked me to talk about the fake
Okay.
endings. There were 3 fake endings, and I actually wrote them. Do you want to say what they were?
Yeah, it's so hard to describe because the scene that the fake endings were centered around was cut. There was a coffee shop scene. Carrie came back from Paris, and there was the ending that would have summed up what we all saw in Paris, which was, Big is going to come home back to New York, and we're going to make this real adult attempt. And then there was the second ending, which was So
The commercial ending.
which one was that?
That was when, like, I'm marrying Petrovsky.
Oh yeah. Would
Now,
you
none
all
of these-
ladies be my maids?
Will you be my maid of honor?
Yeah.
Will you be my maid of honor? Will you be my
The maid of honor.
And they all say, you can't do that. We knew what the show was going to end, but there was so much press that I wrote a really commercial ending that almost made
Then
me
you
gag.
made one, you know, the classic, you know,
Big
I'm
stood
marrying
you
the
up.
city. I'm marrying the city of New York, and Big stood me up, and I'm with my gals.
And you know, that's the scene that worked the best, oddly
you
enough.
just saw them.
Yeah. Should we bring out the writers?
Yes, please
All right,
do.
we'll bring out the writers.
Far more interesting.
No, I don't think so.
I do.
They're delightful. Okay, I'm going to bring the
I
writers out
apologize.
in the order that they joined the writing staff. Okay,
That's
so
nice.
first I'm going to bring out. Also, I want you to do a little writing. I asked.
Okay.
I gave Sarah just a little writing assignment. I asked her to think of a descriptive adjective to describe each of these writers.
First, I had to look up adjective. And descriptive.
And okay,
kidding.
so Jenny, I'm going to bring out Jenny Bix, who's the executive producer. And before I bring her out, I want to say that Jenny's range on the show is she actually created the character of Mr. Pussy, a man who only
Something to
liked
make our
oral
family
sex.
proud.
And she also wrote the episode where Misha kills. Petrovsky kills the mouse, and Samantha really deals with her cancer. So the adjective to describe Jenny would be
Mighty.
the mighty Jenny Bix, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have the other executive producer, Cindy Shupek. Cindy has gone, her range goes from Tuckus Lingus to the beautiful baptism show. An adjective for Cindy.
Well, I had trouble with, I wanted to make her a verb.
By all means. Verb her.
To savor.
Okay. The Savorlicious. Cindy Shupek.
Is that all right?
Okay. Okay, next is Amy B. Harris. Amy wrote the angry carnation scene and the tearful Harry Charlotte proposal. Adjective for Amy?
Needed.
Needed. The very needed Amy B. Harris. Strut it, baby. She's nobody's fool. Single. Okay. Just saying. She might be needed. So many ways. Okay. Now we have our only writing team, Julie Rottenberg and Elisa Zaritsky. We call them the twins. I'm bringing them out separately because they're incredible individuals. But their range together has extended from the Samantha rape fantasy into Miranda's mother's funeral. So let's bring out an adjective for Julie.
Determined.
The determined Julie Rottenberg. Please. Julie. Here she comes. Julie, you're over there. Julie, you're very determined to be here.
Determined to get my mic properly on.
Okay, and an adjective for Elisa Zaritsky.
Inquisitive.
The inquisitive. All of a sudden, I'm James Lipton. The inquisitive. Elisa Zaritsky, please. Yeah, very nice. And finally, the very last writer to join our show, Liz Tucciullo, who wrote the breakup monologue of Berger and wrote my actually favorite voiceover question this year, Why Are We Shooting All Over Ourselves? Adjective for Liz?
Observant.
The observant, Liz Tucciullo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Doing the Brooklyn strut. Brooklyn in the house.
She's single also.
Okay, Liz.
Yes.
You joined us last. Tell us what you walked into. What was the writing room like?
Well, I was just thinking about that today. I walked into I don't think I'm making this up. It was the Monday after you won the Emmy.
Yeah.
So so it's my first day of work. I had never worked on a TV show, and I walk in, and I had to move to LA, and I walk into the room, and there's an Emmy on the table.
Which just happened to get
Just happened. And then, for some reason, the Golden Globe Awards were
Had just
lost.
arrived.
So then they came that day, and then there were baked goods and flowers and telegrams. So there wasn't a lot of work done that day. And there were a lot of like a self-congratulatory kind of feeling. And I was like, I think everyone's a little stuck up. I'm surprised, because they seemed so nice when I interviewed with them. They seemed really all down to earth, but I think they might be full of themselves. I was a little worried.
I want to just ask families' reactions to working on the show. Amy.
I think my parents are actually in the audience tonight.
I'm so sorry. And so proud.
When I first started on the show and it wasn't on the air, and they were telling people I was working on Sex and the City, it was being confused with real sex, I think. So they were sort of horrified, I think, and trying to explain, and they didn't even know what it was, so they were very embarrassed. And then I sat next to them at the premiere, and it was all about up the butt and taking it up the butt. And I thought, I don't know what their reaction was. My dad was laughing very hard, and I was dying inside and decided I should probably go into therapy for the rest of my life. And then, once they saw what was, hitting the screen and what an incredible experience it was for me, it's just been, an endless source of pride, I think, for them.
Jenny.
Boy, that was a good answer.
She's kind of stuck up, though.
I'm really, I'm happy that the Harrises are happy for me, too. My parents are thrilled, thrilled. My dad is, as Kim Cattrall's #1 fan, stalks her on set.
You don't blame the man.
You can't.
You can't blame the man.
She's lovely. She's lovely. They're thrilled. They're thrilled. They're thrilled.
Liz.
I hadn't even thought about that. Thrilled to have a job, that I got a television job, that I wasn't going to be poor the rest of my life. And then my 83-year-old mother, unfazed, thought it was fantastic. Started watching it, got all the episodes and watched them. And then I have this conservative brother and sister-in-law who it actually made them loosen up because we ended up having to have these conversations about the show. So it actually enriched our relationship.
Julie.
Oi.
Julie's of an intellectual Jewish family in Philadelphia.
Originally, of course, my parents did not have HBO, and is that funny?
They only watched
Sad?
Channel 13.
So I had to sort of really give them all the cues they needed, that this was a really great show that people loved, that has been critically received, and started, pulling up all the old, any kind of reviews that had the word Dostoevsky, and which we had been compared to by some, cockamamie academic and some obscure guide. And also once I introduced it to them and they heard I was working on it, slowly but surely their friends came out of the closet. People they never knew watched the show it turned out to be huge fans. So that sort of gave it a lot of legitimacy, and it's. Now they're very proud and excited, and my father is stopped on the street, and his hairdresser is telling him what she wants to happen to Samantha, and so they've come a long way. Although the minute the finale aired, goodbye HBO. And in fact, in between our seasons, those little months in between, my dad would call and shut it off. Yeah. So, and you wonder why I clip coupons.
My mother tapes the episodes as though she doesn't know who works on the show. I tell you, it's okay. You know someone. I can get you copies. She tapes every episode just
Elisa.
to have it.
Well, I guess the arc of my parents, the first night I found out that I was getting higher on the show, I happened to be home in Philadelphia. And they were in stunned silence. We all were a little bit freaked out by the greatness and excitement. And we happened to turn on HBO and an episode was airing. And the episode, we stood, I remember we had to watch television in our little kitchen TV. So we all just stood.
Why?
I don't know. The regular
Punishment?
TV was broken or something. And so we all stood by the television. My parents hadn't really been watching it. And it happened to be the episode where Samantha's pubic hair was being shaved into a lightning bolt. And my father was nervously laughing, and my mother, silence. So that was a little uncomfortable. Just to be watching with your parents anything like that is uncomfortable, and I don't recommend it. And but then now, 3.5 years later, if someone, my mother loves telling me that if people always in Philadelphia come up and they say, where does your daughter get her ideas? Now she says, me. So that's the arc of her character development.
Cindy.
I would say it's opened up a dialogue with my parents. I never wanted to open up, and I want closed again.
SJ, your mother's liberal, so she loves it.
Yeah, but we don't discuss it.
Uh-huh.
She's that kind of liberal.
My mother's Irish Catholic. She's 80, and I never had a conversation with her about sex in my
you gotta
entire
please
life.
tell us
And
some
one
stories.
time, my sister came home and said, "Mom, did you tape Michael's show?" And it was the show where Charlotte gets her vagina painted. And my mother went, I don't know. I put that tape in, and I got all flustered. And I said, Mom, what do you think of the show? She said, I gagged. I gagged. That is the most disgusting part of the human body. I gagged. Then she said, I got embarrassed in front of the dog, and she's a girl. All right, I'm gonna say some of the criticisms we've had, and anyone can react. Women don't talk like that.
That's not true. We do.
Just talk to the van driver who drives us to work. He can
He's heard it all.
I feel like not obviously in our room we have to have these conversations where they wouldn't wind up on the page and on the screen, but since the show aired, the kind of dialogues that have happened that I hear about from women in the real world, if nothing else, I feel like it was this inciting incident, this sort of ignition of this conversation that happens, I think, a lot more now, perhaps.
I mean, we always said to women, at least think like this, and then are we going to get a nerve if we say it out loud? And then I think women did start, and we started. I mean, for all of us, or at least for me, it was liberating to be in a safe room with people who you could say aloud things that you thought. I mean, your biggest fear was to present a story idea and actually have it be the one time that people go, no, that's never.
That's just you.
That's totally right up with them.
Okay, here's something else that we hear. These are just gay men.
I think our presence speaks for itself. What more do
It
we have to
hurts.
do?
Yeah, that was frustrating. I mean, also, but I agree with what Michael was trying to say in the beginning, that, I mean, he wrote these women better than any man, gay, straight woman. I mean, he's a fantastic writer. It was a silly criticism, and it did bother us because there was this room full of women sharing our tales of woe.
At one point, somebody in the media actually said, there are no women writers, they're just drag queens writing this with something up their ass. And this was a woman writer.
We do have things up our ass.
Which half?
I was going to say I was a drag queen.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's weird to have a whole thing. It's weird to have a whole thing sort of collapse when I'm working with women all day long, and it all is about gay men because Darren and I started writing it, and we happened to be gay. You know, it was weird, right?
Yeah, and it's hard because you do feel as though for some reason they can't accept that women can write this stuff. And when we clearly are doing it, and we're not gay men yet.
We're closeted gay men.
But we've learned a lot from gay men. A lot.
I think, though, also it was a reaction to these women can't be that sexually liberated. Like Samantha was criticized as being a gay man, whatever that meant to people, because she was sexually voracious and just hedonistic and just did things because she wanted to and not. I mean, I think it was.
You got that question a lot, right?
Yeah, I just think it's a way of people. Sometimes I thought, because it actually didn't really go away. I mean, it was a fairly consistent criticism, really till the very end. And sometimes I think it's a way of people feeling that they're safely being homophobic, like they are sort of lashing out. And partly I think it's because of women speaking in what is still considered, although I think there's certainly shows on commercial that are also, can be verbally, sometimes stunning. I think it's an idea about the show because the word sex is in the title and it's sort of provocative. Just by that, I think it's just an easy way to criticize the show, and it's easy. It doesn't take a great deal of thought, and people pick up on criticism, and like anything. And
where are all these men?
well.
Well, some of them.
No, where are all the men that all these women are dating all the time? Where are these men in New York?
They actually are. I mean, people are always like, oh, it must be so hard in New York to date. And the thing is, I actually don't think it's very hard to date in New York. I think it's hard to find the right guy, a great guy. But there's a lot of men out there in Manhattan, and a lot of them are freaks.
But don't mince words.
Yes, and Jenny wrote all about that. But I mean, I think we've written about a lot of those types of men who are,
Well,
whether
I think the thing
their
about it
commitment-
was that there are a lot of men, but they don't prove to be the right men for that particular time. So they may as well not.
Exactly.
Oh, they almost may as well not exist in a way. But in fact, the city is truly littered with all sorts of different men.
People, and if you're,
It's just who's right.
And we're a very optimistic bunch, and I think that was hard for us too because we would get the criticism a lot that we were so negative and that we were throwing men away all the time on the show. When you've never met 6, I think, very optimistic women in the face of a lot of relationship issues.
and I
that
think
we've had.
I can't speak for everybody, but I feel for me, one of the things we all seem to have in common is that we're in all our different ways.
That we're gay men.
We're gay men.
Obviously.
But that in our own special, unique ways, each of us doing it in our own way, we're all really searching for real love, and we're willing to date lots of different people to see that and go for it. But we're all looking for real connected relationships.
I think it's no surprise that as the room got stronger and they became more of a relationship themselves, that the characters on the show started to become incredibly invested. And you've often said that the women hold the standard up.
Yeah, I think
to men
that I always thought that the standard that any of the women have on the show is a standard that they have for their friendships, and the friendships are everything, and they have a high standard for one another, and they are perfectly comfortable voicing their disappointments in each other and supporting and celebrating their triumphs. And I think that's really when I talk to you all. As I sit in my married seat, that's what you guys say you want, is that kind of substantial, and I think that's the thing that you all have done best of all, is write the necessity of those women in each other's lives.
And the diversity of the women up here and the diversity of the other actresses playing these parts, it's just been really fun for us. Now, nobody has that many Manolo Blahniks.
That's not true.
Wait a minute. Liz, how many pairs?
None, but my best friend Nadia Dejani has a lot of shoes.
Amy.
Manolos or shoes in general?
Fancy Manolo-esque.
A lot.
Tell the truth.
50 to 75.
Jenny?
I'm maybe 30 to 30.
I'm shocked at that. Cindy?
Not a lot, but I grew up in Oklahoma. I had to learn what these things were, so maybe 10.
Okay. Elisa?
As a writing team, I would say between us, maybe 20 pairs of shoes.
Shoes. Julie, how many Manolos do you have?
Sorry.
Manolos.
Take that from the record.
No.
In general, I'm so sorry.
No, Manolo.
Manolos.
I thought you were going to make
Zero Manolos.
Zero Manolos.
And you?
Zero.
And SJ?
I can't talk about it.
And finally, one other detail I want to know. Brazilian bikini wax.
Pro or con?
Yes, no, pro or con. Liz, did they get you? First of all, Jenny's a big pusher for the Brazilian. Jenny was practically moving people to Brazil at one point. She's like, ladies, get on board.
No. Let's tell the real story.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have a Brazilian.
Michael has a Brazilian. Do you want to tell the story of how that story came up?
Well, let's go.
Okay, somebody on this stage went and got a normal bikini wax, and they unfortunately took off more than she had wanted. And
How much?
Because there was a language.
a lot.
There was a language issue.
Was it you?
Yes, it was me.
No one knows that.
This can happen.
It can happen, and people
This is sort of like PCA.
Yes, I'm here to help people. And my husband, this husband didn't believe me. I tried to stop her. No, we talked about it. It was horrifying.
It became a story of, if you remember the LA episode in the end of season 3 that I wrote, Carrie went and got a wax, and it became a Brazilian wax, and she felt cold and exposed, and it made her crazy.
And young.
And she ended up sleeping with Vince Vaughn, and so things happen.
Get a Brazilian and you'll sleep with Vince Vaughn. That is the moral.
I have not slept with Vince Vaughn.
People will be running out to do that.
So that's how that started. Okay, we're going to end with this little tiny thing I asked everybody to do. Each of the writers, in their own particular hell or heaven when they're writing the show, has to come up with a Carrie voiceover. that they relate to. So we're going to go out with the writers each reading The Voice of Carrie because they wrote that. So let's start with Liz.
People say everything happens for a reason. These people are usually women. And these women are usually sorting through a breakup. It seems that men can get out of a relationship without even a goodbye, but apparently women have to either get married or learn something. Why are we in such a rush to move from confused to Confucius? Do we search for lessons to lessen the pain?
Julie.
First of all, to do these when
Julie.
Jessica's sitting here. Okay.
Julie.
As progressive as our society claims to be, there are still certain life targets we're all supposed to hit. Marriage, babies, and a home to call your own. But what if, instead of breaking out in a smile, you break out in a rash? Is something wrong with the system, or is it you? And do we really want these things, or are we just programmed to think we do?
Amy.
Here I was, a 35-year-old single woman with no financial security but many life experiences behind me. Did that mean nothing? After all, heartbreak and breakups are the hardest kind of work, so shouldn't there be some sort of credit for enduring it? And if not, how do you retain any sense of value when you have nothing concrete to show for it? Because at the end of yet another failed relationship, when all you have is war wounds and self-doubt, you have to wonder, what's it all worth?
Elisa.
One of the signs that a female gorilla is in love is that she can be seen picking nits off her male companion. And yet in humans, nitpicking can ruin a perfectly good evening. Not to mention a relationship. Are there times when the ladies should just shut the fuck up?
Oh, yeah, the guys like that one.
Oh, yeah.
Jenny. Oh, that's a big hit with the guys.
But we're not done yet. Since birth, modern women have been told we can do and be anything we want. Be an astronaut, the head of an internet company, a stay-at-home mom. There aren't any rules anymore, and the choices are endless, and apparently they can all be delivered right to your door. But is it possible that we've gotten so spoiled by choices that we've become unable to make one? That a part of us knows that once you choose something, one man, one great apartment, one amazing job, another option goes away? Are we a generation of women who can't choose just one from column A? Did we all have too much to handle, or was Samantha right? Can we have it all?
Cindy.
This is an episode where Carrie was one bad date away from becoming cynical. So maybe it's not even advisable to be an optimist after the age of 30. Maybe pessimism is something we have to start applying daily, like moisturizer. Otherwise, how do you bounce back when reality batters your belief system and love does not, as promised, conquer all? Is hope a drug we need to go off of, or is it keeping us alive? What's the harm in believing?
Great. And I'm going to read the first part, and I want you to read the second, okay? And mine is, maybe our mistakes are what make our fate. Without them, what would shape our lives? Perhaps if we never veered off course, we wouldn't fall in love or have babies or be who we are. You do the honors.
After all, seasons change, so do cities. People come into your life and people go. But it's comforting to know the ones you love are always in your heart. And if you're very lucky, a plane ride away.
Thank you.